welcome back to Who's Worse, where I cover what I believe to be the worst episode of a particular season of Doctor Who. As always, this is only my opinion. If you think another episode is worse than what I picked, feel free to share your thoughts. This time, I'm taking a look at Season 4, so let's get started. Season 4 is a weird one in that it features 2 Doctors rather than 1. This won't happen again until Season 21, but it'll be a while before I get there. Probably in about 2 years or so. Anyway, let's eliminate the missing stories. Yeah, there are only 3 stories to choose from again. Even worse, one of the missing stories got a standalone release with crappy reconstructions. I'm going to level with you here. If it wasn't for the fact that it's incomplete, this would be on the chopping block instead. And I'm not joking about how bad the reconstructions are. This image on the screen right now, it lasted for 1 minute and 23 seconds. Oh, and even better, they didn't bother putting the title sequence in the reconstructions. They just inserted an image from it instead. That's how lazy they were. So now I have to review the second worst episode instead. Let's check on the remaining stories. I thought I knew what the worst story would be before watching Season 4, but it wound up exceeding my expectations. That story was The Power of the Daleks. I'm talking about the animated version, and while the visuals aren't great in the slightest, the story more than makes up for them. Not only is it a strong showing for the Daleks, but it's also a great introduction to the second Doctor. Here we are with the last 2 stories, which feel about the same to me. However, one was slightly better than the other. What will it be this time? The one with Cybermen in Antarctica, or the one with Cybermen in space? Congratulations, you cybernetic sensation! You're up for review today! It's worth noting that this story is quite important when it comes to the show's history. Prior to its production, William Hartnell, who had spent the past 3 years being the Doctor, was asked to leave the show. There were 2 reasons for this. 1, his health was failing, and 2, he didn't get along with the new production team. This wasn't the first attempt at getting Hartnell out of the role. A previous attempt was made by former producer John Wiles and script editor Donald Tosh. Their idea involved the celestial toy maker making the Doctor disappear, and when he came back, he would look different. However, the plan fell through, and it pushed John Wiles one step closer to leaving production. His successor, Innes Lloyd, fared better. He had a hand in a concept that was a risky move at the time, but is synonymous with the show these days: Regeneration. Script editor Jerry Davis theorized that the Doctor, being an alien, could renew himself via transformation, while Lloyd suggested that it was something the Doctor could do regularly, allowing others to take on the role when necessary. As for Hartnell, he made a suggestion regarding his replacement, and I quote, "There's only one man in England who can take over, and that's Patrick Troughton." The BBC's head of serials at the time, Sean Sutton, strongly agreed with the idea, and fought for Troughton to take over as the Doctor, despite facing opposition from Sidney Newman, the man who launched the creation of Doctor Who. Ultimately, Sutton won out, and on that fateful night of October 29th, 1966, audiences watched as Hartnell changed into Troughton, ushering in a new age for the show. But does this serial as a whole stand up against the test of time? Let's find out together as I look at the game changer known as the 10th Planet. We open on a probe called Zeus 4 launching into space, guided by a base located in the South Pole.
Why not come up and join us?
The penguins might miss me.
Listen to their camaraderie. Would be a shame if something happened that resulted in several of their deaths. The Tardis crew arrives, and as you can see, Stephen and Dodo are gone. In their places are Ben and Polly, both of whom debuted in The War Machines and got on board the Tardis in an attempt to return Dodo's key. Instead, they wound up traveling with the Doctor until the second-to-last serial of this season, The Faceless Ones, which happens to be missing, along with many of their adventures. Fucking hell, BBC. I think they're alright, but they pale in comparison to most of the other companions so far. They're miles ahead of Dodo, though, that's for sure. Anyhow, it doesn't take long before the crewmen notice the group and bring them down to the base, where they're interrogated. How the dude watching in the first place didn't realize that the Tardis came out of nowhere, I don't know.
He's not gonna like it.
Get him! Why don't you speak up? I'm Jeff.
I've had some trouble hearing ever since that incident with the Zarbi. When the interrogation doesn't work out, the CEO of the base, General Cutler, forces the TARDIS crew into a small room. Though I'd be careful around him. It looks like a vampire bit him not too long ago. The Doctor bursts his companions' hopes of getting home because, as it turns out, they're in the year 1986. In this universe's 1986, people have been going to the moon and back. Lucky bastards. But some problems arise, starting with Zeus 4 experiencing power loss. The Doctor tries to offer some help, but Cutler rejects him. He's too busy looking at the Death Star in the distance. Actually, it's another planet, and its quick approach prompts the crew to get Zeus 4 back to Earth. This goes about as well as you'd expect.
Look!
After another attempt to get the crew to listen to him fails, the Doctor shares his concerns about the new planet.
Well, you see, Ben, I know what this planet is and what it means to Earth.
What does it mean to Earth?
Well, that pretty soon we shall be having visitors.
Cutler's response is to get his men to break into the TARDIS because of his own suspicions regarding the trio. They never get that far, because the visitors the Doctor was concerned about arrive. Behold, my friends, the first incarnation of the Cybermen, made up of assorted junk and stockings. Okay, I'm poking fun at it, but despite the clear lack of a budget here, I don't mind this design. Hell, I prefer this over the design used in their next appearance. It reminds the audience that they were once human, an element that future designs lack. Don't get me wrong, they look cool, but that's the thing. They exchanged their uncanniness for a more robotic look, from something uncomfortably familiar to something pleasantly familiar. Anyway, it doesn't take long before news of the planet's existence starts to spread across the globe.
Jodrell Bank, England, says the planet is approaching Earth, but there is absolutely no cause for alarm.
Okay, now you're just asking for something bad to happen.
That was an order! Take that man back to the office!
See? That's what happens when you say nothing bad will happen. The Cybermen reveal that they came from the new planet called Mondas. They're surprisingly cordial, going so far as to explain their origins. Even when Cutler alerts a base in Geneva, all they do is scold him. And then their somewhat affable nature dies when they threaten to destroy their only means of communicating with Zeus 4.
Stop!
Did you think you could escape this story so easily? No. Good. For his efforts, Ben is thrown into a projection room. Look on the plus side, Ben. At least you've got something entertaining to watch. Meanwhile, the crewmen work on getting Zeus 4 down, despite the Cybermen insisting that there's nothing they can do. Unfortunately, they're proven right, because after Zeus 4 loses the last of its fuel, it's destroyed. The visitors decide to use this opportunity to gather information from the others, as they want to save them before Mondas drains all of Earth's energy and destroys it. Anyone that's aware of the Cybermen's MO knows that being saved by them isn't a good thing. While everyone else is arguing with the Cybermen, Ben is busy trying to get out of his predicament.
Just imagine trying to tackle one of them geezers with a screwdriver.
Yeah, that would be silly. He finally figures out a way to escape. Through the power of film! Sadly, the guard makes it clear that he doesn't have the same taste in movies. With the weapon he took, Ben is able to put the Cyberman down and escape. And once he returns to the main room, he and Cutler are able to turn the tables on the Cybermen. Unfortunately, this victory is short-lived. See, the people over in Geneva sent up another probe to help bring Zeus 4 down. And who's the person in that probe? Why, Cutler's son, of course! Oh, and there's a whole fleet of Cybermen on the way. And the Doctor passes out because he's getting closer to his own demise. But just when you think the serial's done piling problems on the protagonists, Cutler decides to use the Z Bomb. What is the Z Bomb? Well, it's a doomsday weapon that can destroy Mondas. That sounds reasonable, except if the Z Bomb is used to destroy Mondas, there's a chance that it'll deliver radiation fallout to Earth. Surely there's no way Cutler will get permission to use the bomb, right? Well, he doesn't.
But you do give me authority to take any action necessary against the Cybermen? Yes, of course.
What he does get is a loophole to abuse, allowing him to justify the use of the Z-Bomb. Consequences be damned. When Ben objects, he throws him into the room with the unconscious doctor. Before he's forced to leave, he asks Polly to turn Barclay over to their side, since he has plenty of misgivings regarding Cutler's plan. Now, on the one hand, I can't blame Cutler for his reaction. His sun and planet are in immediate danger, after all. On the other hand, he really doesn't seem to care enough about either to consider a plan outside of nuking Mondas to hell. I get the appeal of explosions, I do, but not when the resulting blast could kill the Earth via radiation. Thankfully for the companions, Barclay joins them in their quest to stop Cutler. You know, now might be a good time to check on that Cybermen fleet. They're going to arrive any moment now. Well, I would give congratulations, but they missed 2 of them. I wonder if that will come back to bite them in the ass later. Meanwhile, with a map Barclay drew up, Ben gets into the rocket silo and attempts to disarm the bomb. Unfortunately, Cutler realizes that Barclay is missing and goes straight to the silo. Dude's willing to resort to murder to protect his precious bomb. Oh, and for good measure, he threatens to kill Ben, Polly, and Barclay if the bomb doesn't launch. For the rest of episode 3, we're left to wonder whether or not Ben succeeded, Ben himself included. In his defense, he just survived a nasty fall. All that's left is episode 4, but it's technically missing. Why technically? Because a version of it exists! Just not the original version. Maybe. See, in order to fill in the gaps, several serials had their missing episodes replaced by animation. Usually, they were limited to 1 or 2 animated episodes. Of course, quality varies, since some episodes were done by different companies. In the case of the 10th Planet Episode 4, the animation was done by Planet 55, a studio situated in Australia that also worked on animated episodes for The Reign of Terror and The Moon Base. Anyhow, back to the review. The good news is Ben messed up the bomb enough to keep it from launching. The bad news is Cutler is about to make good on his promise. Even worse, the Doctor returns with a case of dead face. In comparison to everyone else's faces, his sticks out like a sore thumb. It's the same one used in the animated episodes of The Reign of Terror, but they had... well...
Oh, that's all right, jailer. I don't think I shall stay after all. Eh? No, I'm sure the mate will understand. It's a pity that I asked him to put me up.
Mercifully, that face is only 2D animated here. Since things have a habit of getting worse, Cutler gets a transmission from his son that seems to indicate his demise. At that point, Cutler just goes full-blown Blair on everyone.
I'll kill you!
Oddly enough, the Doctor and his crew are saved by... another group of Cybermen. Cutler really should have listened to his men about their approach. The Doctor tries to convince the Cybermen to live on Earth in peace, but they refuse to talk until the Z Bomb is disarmed. The others accept, if only to buy for time until Mondas destroys itself by absorbing too much energy. How did they come to that conclusion? Well, Ben mentioned back in episode 3 that the Doctor said it would happen. We never actually see him say that, so let's say Ben learned it from him through the power of off-screen magic. However, to make sure no one ignores their orders, the Cybermen take Polly and the Doctor hostage, with the former being forced to go on their ship.
You give me your word that this young girl will be returned to me when that bomb is safely stowed away?
Yes?
I don't know why, but that face combined with the way the Cyberman said yes is kind of amusing. And if you think the polar base is having problems, wait until you see what's happening in Geneva.
Who are you? I am now controller of the Earth.
My first order is to make everyone talk like us. Actually, it's funny that the Cyberman calls itself Controller of the Earth, considering there's a serial that features a cyber controller. Oh, and about that offer to live on Earth in peace. They're giving it a big fat middle finger because now they want to destroy it before Mondas self-destructs. And how do they plan on doing that? With the Z Bomb, of course! In hindsight, having a planet-ending weapon at your disposal doesn't seem like a good idea.
Take the old man out to the spacecraft.
You will regret this.
You are a frail old man. You cannot stop us. Not right now, but in the future you will. Ben and company are able to put 2 and 2 together and discover the Cybermen's weakness to radiation. With the Doctor and Polly gone, it's up to them to save the day. Well, Ben and Barclay at least. Dyson's been busy acting like a Debbie Downer. Guys like him either wind up embarrassed or dead in these stories. He'd better shape up fast.
Records Krang!
Yes, you heard that right. There's a Cyberman named Krang. 2 things. 1, this isn't the only time Cybermen had names, but this is the only serial where they do. And 2, this came out well before TMNT was a thing. Back with the men, they've decided to use radioactive rods to weaken the Cybermen long enough for Ben to blast them with their weapon. In response, the Cybermen try to gas them out. Ultimately, the men win out, at the cost of one of their own. They return topside and use a device the Cybermen left behind to lure in others. Unfortunately, those rods powered up the base, and the emergency power gives out long enough for more Cybermen to enter unopposed. Luckily for everyone else, it's at this moment that Mondas breaks apart, and when that planet goes, so does its inhabitants. Instead of falling over dead, however, they just disintegrate. Weren't they humans turned robots? Surely there would be something left behind in those suits. Oh, and it turns out Cutler's son is alive! Yeah! Lovely. Someone's gonna have to tell him about his dad being dead. Ben doesn't stick around, as he's busy making sure Polly and the Doctor are okay. Polly's fine, she's just frightened out of her wits. The Doctor, not so much. Ben, you're not looking too well. So the Doctor leaves, declaring that it's far from being all over. He's right, it isn't. He's got an adventure with the 12th Doctor coming up. And so the story ends with Polly and Ben barely getting into the Tardis. Just in time for the Doctor to regenerate. Farewell, one. You're certainly not my favorite, but you'll be missed nonetheless. That was the 10th planet, and it was okay. Just okay. The story itself doesn't really have anything to write home about. Really, the only notable things were the introduction of the Cybermen and the Doctor's regeneration. True, those things wound up leaving their marks in the mythos of the series, but in regards to this one serial, they're the only memorable moments in it. Of course, that's not to say there weren't good things about this serial. The sets were decent, with several of the rooms looking cramped. When the Cybermen were around, people had no choice but to remain in close proximity of them, creating an oppressive atmosphere. And even if someone was able to escape the clutches of the Cybermen, where could they go? To a radioactive room where they would eventually suffocate via gas? Or outside in the bitter cold of the Antarctic, where the Cybermen could just follow and kill them off? Truly, the people of the base had nowhere to run, and had to pick between submitting and fighting back. While several of them did try to resist, Cutler was the one character who took things a few notches too far. There's a reason why Barclay said he was ruthless. While he was friendly enough around the rest of the crew, when the Tardis trio arrived, he didn't treat them well, and even believed they were in league with the Cybermen. When his son's life was threatened, he went straight off the deep end, willing to potentially annihilate Earth just to destroy Mondas. He wasn't as villainous as the Cybermen, but in the end, he brought just as much tension as they did because he was willing to do whatever he deemed necessary to save his son. As for the animation, it's fairly decent. Sure, there were some questionable moments here and there, but as a whole, it's far from the worst animation the series used. It's certainly better than the 3D faces from the Reign of Terror. In comparison to the other episodes I've reviewed, it's easily the best. However, there's still the fact that the actual worst episode this season avoided getting a review because it was incomplete. So here's what I'm going to do. If the Underwater Menace is ever completed, whether by animation or by episodes 1 and 4 being found, I will do a follow-up review covering it. For now, though, the 10th Planet is simply the weakest complete episode this season. It isn't bad, but it doesn't come close to being great. And with that, the first Doctor era comes to a close. But before I move on to Season 5, I want to give the old man a send-off. Join me next time as I talk about my personal favorite First Doctor episodes.